Hello and welcome to the Wolf Den Podcast, your home for competitive Digimon TCG discussion and news. I'm your host Nako, joined by my co-host Zenitsu. This week, we will be discussing Digimon news updates and the release of BT11. Listen to us on your favorite podcasting networks, link in the description below, or find us at Wolf Den Digimon TCG.
On top of that, we also stream this over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it's also uploaded as a YouTube video under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu.
For our viewer question of the week, this week's question is, should Digimon have larger main sets?
Uh, I this is kind of a mixed bag question for me personally because we've seen Digimon with bigger sets in Special Booster 1.0 and 1.5, and scarcity of those products aside, it definitely, based on the ratios that they're trying to give us, it's definitely harder, which might be a good thing and it might be a bad thing. I definitely think that if anything, EX boosters are too small. So if they make main boosters larger, I definitely think EX boosters should kind of be as large as where our normal boosters are. Just because these small sets, it's too easy to pull everything but the secret rare, and it's just not fun or enjoyable of a product to open in my perspective.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's hard to try and compare products like that because they're kind of only what they are. Digimon hasn't really experimented too much outside of the introduction of the EX sets, however long ago, which they haven't really played with the formula too much since their inception. I guess except outside of EX1. But um, I'm of the opinion, I think we mentioned it last time, or I mentioned it last time, that Digimon sets should be larger. Mostly to at least encourage people to buy and open product more. Um, I think there's a lot of the fun or the mystery of opening packs has been removed by most, adult-ish lovers of the card game because we don't operate like I remember when I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh when I was a kid and I would go to my card store and I would play on like a Saturday afternoon and I would get, enough money to basically buy maybe a pack or two. And that was how I enjoyed the card game. And for those that still enjoy the card game that way, then Digimon's fine because I mean, I guess in some ways, but then because you hit a super rare and you're like, wow, this is a super rare card and it's $3. And or you hit a secret rare, which I mean, good luck, congratulations, but even depending on if it's the good secret rare, depending on the set, maybe it's $60, maybe it's $30. But the point I'm trying to make is that the sealed product is a little too easy to predict and almost not fun. I don't get a lot of joy necessarily in opening a sealed product. It's pretty methodical at this point. It's I lay my stacks out, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven supers, two alt arts, and I can actually throw the rest of the packs away because I've gotten what I've gotten out of them. There's no RNG. And I think that's something that Digimon could maybe do with a larger set is remove some of that standardness of sealed product. I mean, maybe I'm alone here. Maybe people really like the fact that they get exactly what they think they're going to get out of a sealed product, but I have it pulled up here as a comparison just because it's the thing that I remember, and it's really bringing back the trading in trading card game. But there's no reason for even if you're someone like Zenitsu, who you're buying a case of a sealed product, to have a full playset, like a master set of the entire outside of alt arts, right? But alt arts we don't really talk about as far as owning full master set of things. But you have a maximum legal playable copies of every card in the set from buying 12 boxes. Preferably in a case format, though not necessarily. And um, Magic, they have their equivalent of the secret rare is the mythic rare, I mean, I guess, they had it first, so Digimon copied them. But uh, from their most recent set release, they have 20, which would be the equivalent of secret rares. And you get, I think, up between 2 or 4 a box. That is my memory. I don't know if I ever got 4, but I've definitely gotten 3 and I've definitely gotten 2. Um, and so there's some swing there. It's not one or the other. It's okay. I've gotten 3 mythic rares. Let me throw the box out. Like there could be a fourth. I don't know. Still, I'm trying to remember here, but also 20 mythic rares. You're not even getting one of every one of them, even if you buy 12 boxes,
E-
right?
yeah, even with the Magic comparison, they have a butt ton of rares, and even in their, like, if you open up a full case for their game, you're still not gonna see a full playset of all of the rares. You'd be lucky to see one of each of the rares.
Exactly. And like that brings out the trading card game. And now, does that make acquiring cards that you want many copies of annoying? Yes, but it encourages more of a community aspect. I've honestly, at this point, it's annoying to me when I do have to reach out to people for certain things because for the most part, either they're very expensive and then it's annoying that I have to like, hey, here's like $30 for an Examon, or, I gotta shell out $120 for a playset of Examon, or I go ahead and, maybe I'm someone who's picking up the game later and man, I really want to play this new hotness everyone's talking about, Blackboard Greymon. So I go and I don't even know, I haven't looked recently, but if it's changed, um, the BT8 Blackboard Greymon at one point was like $3. And if I ask somebody for that, it's not even almost worth slotting into a trade binder at a $3 card.
Yeah, the SRs usually are pretty low except for like the hot one or two, which actually doesn't happen depending on the set, just because if the secret is good, that means there's going to be more chase for the secrets, which means more packs are going to get open, and then the supers are going to get absolutely crushed. And then, yeah, then, like you said, sometimes those supers aren't even worth putting into your trade binder because they're just that worthless. Um, I definitely think like maybe they have been playing around a little bit with just the change on the approach on how they do boxes, because like we saw 1.0 was like almost 180 cards in that set. There was 20 supers, and the supers were actually really hard to get. They still had the 2 secrets, or no, they had 3 secrets, my bad, in that one.
Hmm.
So there was some variance on the secrets as well. And then on top of that, in 1.5, the set was reduced to about 150-ish cards, still keeping the 3 secrets, and they made the super rares only 10 of them, or 11, and it was still really easy to pull those cards, and they weren't worth a whole lot, but the rares were actually pretty hard to pull in that set just because of the slight change in how things were getting pulled and how things were packaged and all that jazz. BT4 was another small change. That's when things basically got to almost this normalization point that we had now. Not to give like a full timeline, but just giving an example of like they do these small tweaks to sets. And I do think that like maybe changing how packs work, if they're going to be keeping this BT11 approach, at least for the foil commons and foil uncommons, that might be something to examine. Or like what we were thinking, maybe just a slightly bigger set, having instead of like 10 supers, maybe have like 13 or 15, and then keep the 3 secrets so there's more variance on the secrets. So there's some small things that they could do to try to encourage that. And like, I don't think sets need to be as small as EX sets. I think those are like borderline disgusting. I've came from other card games where they do those small sets, and those, if anything, annoyed the crap out of me, because some places will price those as normal boosters when they're not normal boosters. Like I'm physically getting less amount of variance in cards and still paying the same amount just because the card quantities are the same. And I'm just like, that shouldn't, no, one has nothing to do with the other, because the financial value of those cards is going to, like, the EV is going to be way less because there's less variance, because the set is smaller. So maybe that'll increase the Digimon market to make things more expensive depending on their approach. And that might be a good thing or that might be a bad thing depending on who you ask and the type of player that you are.
Yeah. It interesting that you mentioned that because um, I I played Vanguard so minimally, but when Vanguard rebooted last year, I want to say was that last year? Um, I went ahead with my friends and we were gonna like throw together some Vanguard decks because I'd never played it and they were remember it fondly from back before they broke it and had to reboot it. And so when they had the new booster for Vanguard come out, my LGS had them at like $35. And I was like, oh my god, this game's ridiculous. Like, this is so cool. I can buy a booster box for $35. Like, hell yeah. And I bought like three. And then I opened it and I was, what is all this empty space? It was like a third of the packs that I thought there was going to be in a booster box. And I was like, I guess that makes sense why it's a third of the price.
And like with the way EX sets are designed, there's like right now in normal boosters we get about 100. I'm just going to round up. I know the exact number. It's 112, but for rounding sake I'm going to say 115. There's about 112 to 115 unique cards in a normal BT set. In an EX set, we get like 75. The real number is like 72 or 73 depending on the set, but like we get like 75. That's a fourth less of the cards, a little more than a fourth less of the amount of different cards, which means you're just going to see the same chaff over and over and over again when you're starting to pull packs, and that's going to make the cards basically worthless. And I'm coming from Buddy Fight, where they had something similar, where they had like their big main sets and then they had the subsets, and the subsets they were priced basically like main sets when they were smaller. An even worse example, which actually almost led to the downfall of the game the first time, it is a zombie of a game, is Force of Will. They had, this was in the beginning of the game cycle, they had like sets that was like 150 cards, and then they had a set that was like 50 cards. And booster box wise, same card, like same packs per box, and same amount of cards per pack, and it was sold at a normal price even though there was significantly less cards, and that almost killed the game right then and there. So depending on the pull rate size like that they're trying to go for and the size of the set, that definitely could have a huge impact on the health of the game and its secondary market.
Yeah. Yeah, that sucks. I mean, I'm trying to think. I don't want the cards to be more expensive because like it makes the game less accessible, but I also want there to be some value behind the cards because we're still paying what we're paying for sealed product, and for most people, I mean, there's no financial reason to open them anymore. I guess maybe there was like 1.0, 1.5 card games were super hot. Digimon was brand new, but I think that for someone to open a pack and get SRs and then, or at least open a box and one or two of the cards be 50 to 60% of the total box's value is a little ridiculous. And when those cards don't have to be super expensive, but still just kind of spread out the wealth, maybe cut down on the number of SRs per set, increase the average value. And I think what you also get is the disparity between the good SRs and the bad SRs. And I mean, even something like BT8, Black War Greymon's back up to $10. There are a lot of bad SRs in that set.
Usually, mathematically speaking, less than a third of the cards are going to be playable out of any given booster set. So that comes with the territory from a more competitive aspect. Is there's only a small handful of these cards that are actually going to see any kind of competitive play, which is why like alternate formats is kind of nice because it lets the game have room to breathe. but I'm not a huge fan of Digimon Sealed, even though I'm surprisingly good at it. Most of the time, I come first or second in a lot of my pre-releases. Not to like brag or anything, but like it's because I spend so much time researching these sets, researching the card synergies, and that just allows me to be able to look at these cards at a different angle. But from a more competitive perspective, I'm I don't even give these cards 2 seconds of my time when I'm thinking about building a deck. I'm like, oh, I could use this Ogremon. Nope, not even gonna think about that. Even though in something like Sealed, it's like, oh, this Ogremon being a level 4 that has 7k DP is actually pretty good. It's like how we play changes the usability of the cards, and right now for the competitive environment, most cards just don't get used.
Because
Which
it's
is why,
archetype based.
yeah. Well, it's not
If
necessarily
if
because it's archetype
Ogremon
based.
Tribal was good, you would play the level 4 Ogremon with 7,000 DP because it says Ogremon.
Well, I mean, depending on how they support cards, not necessarily inside of archetypes, just how cards play with each other, like they're just supposed synergies, that could take something as old as Kentarosmon from Special Booster 1.5 and make him more playable. As we've seen with some of the spoilers in the Japanese set that's focused around Royal Knights BT13, which is coming out in
Hmm.
the summer for us. Um, but transitioning into one of the main topics, we actually did get some information in terms of the reboot booster. So the reboot booster, RB for short, Rising Winds, actually did get changed for us. It was originally announced it was going to be 36 cards, which is insane for a set. I don't think booster boxes are exactly what we think. I think that the booster boxes based on the product description was going to be like the premium box set where it's like, oh, here's a small little box, 4 packs in the box, and the set size is very small. I hate those types of products. I hate it when they do small set size, but I also like the fact that it is just all of the new cards, so we don't have to try to dig our way through chaff to be able to get those new cards. But the chaff that was removed was reprints. So the community put up a stink. In this is 100% in the community's rights because we wanted some of those reprints, and some of those reprints are actually pretty good. I've seen back and forth arguments where it's just like, oh yeah, the majority of these reprints are actually chaff in of themselves because everything is like from sets 1 through set 5 in Japan. So it's not like most of those cards are even playable, but some of them still are and hold some decent value. But the fact that we wanted it just for the accessibility on just making some of those cards easier to get, and because the set was more focused on the greatest hits of sets 1 through 5, really condensed some of the reprints to actually be pretty good. And the fact that we didn't get that obviously was pretty disappointing. So Bandai decided to release an announcement to basically reassess and delay Rising Winds as a result, which I think is pretty good. We don't know, again, if they were going to do a separate product for the reprints. I think they were. I don't necessarily know if it was going to be in the adventure box, as they called it. They obviously still have plans, and they didn't announce those plans, but based on community reaction and feedback, it was early enough in the development of printing that set to basically put it on hold and reassess and reevaluate. Because what we don't realize is how the printing process works and how long it takes for things to actually happen. So I definitely think it is good on Bandai that they listened to the fans and to the community and decided to change it, even though I'm not super happy about it personally, just because I just wanted the new cards, and now I'm going to have to dig through old cards that, for the most part, I don't necessarily need and aren't going to be played in order to get those. But we don't know how it's going to change for the US audience. We just now know that they're going to actually put the reprints in.
Yeah, that's I think it was really good that they walked that back. They they saw that people really wanted the reprints and they really wanted the ability to, because I think what it really means more so is less of the actual reprints. Like by the time that this product comes out, by the time that now that we know it's coming out, I don't think there will be any like chase reprints, even the ones that still kind of are holding a higher value, like Starter Deck Greymon was just included in the BT11
Pre-releases.
pre-release, and it was also a box topper from the last Starter Deck that got blown up into box toppers, and they really are on top of making sure there aren't older cards that are just unnecessarily expensive. And I think no one's gonna win like financially because of this reprint set. What it really will do is that the cards that could have like all justification to just go to the moon, like you know, Magna Angemon was at one point like $30-$40, and it's not getting reprinted in English. Like back to the moon. If you want this card, you have to have the 1.0 version of it. No reprints announced since. Um,
Well, there
and
was
those
a Bandai Premium product where you literally could just buy it, but that's a Bandai Premium product, and that doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily
those don't
count.
count.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, would you consider Secret Layers reprints for Magic?
I hate secret layers, and I'm starting to dislike the Bandai Premium stuff unless it's like
It's
really
basically
enticing
Secret
me.
Layers with extra steps,
It is, and like
and you
some
have to
people
wait
like
like
it.
6 months. I mean, maybe I've never actually gotten a Secret Layer. I'm pretty sure that you have to wait a long time for those too. But
Yeah, it took like a year or a year and a half to get some of those secret layers out. Bandai at least tells us when they're gonna do it, but I don't like the fact that I'm buying like a playmat and then I have to wait 6 months for the playmat and the promos, and then by the time I wanted the product, it's like, oh, I actually kind of just don't need this now. It's not the same
mhm,
idea I had 6 months ago.
yeah. Um, Before we get too far away from it, something I remembered that I wanted to say was that I think there's still space for a non-main set product that isn't the EX sets, and it's something that maybe like doesn't exist in Digimon yet, but could exist in Digimon is like those premium products. We really don't have as much the room for it because we don't have the backlog that Magic has, but the sets that have been super successful for Magic in the past, like Modern Masters, Ultimate Masters, Commander sets, stuff like that, where they're targeting maybe there's some new cards, some old cards, and but it's not like a reprint set, but it is a reprint set. But what they do is they take the opportunity to introduce new alt arts, new foil treatments of older cards while so reprinting them, but not necessarily reprinting the lowest level of them, which also is I think something that needs to happen. That you know, I think they should maybe reprint like almost. I mean, just for the sake of their own card quality control, non-foil versions of every card. But um, if you want to run a fully foil-less deck as opposed to a completely foiled deck, that should be something that you could do. And then if you also want to run the, you know, gold foil leaf, Champions Edition Magna Angemon, you can do that too.
I think that's where the reboot set was supposed to be in everyone's heads before it got announced, and like the pull rates on Japan weren't necessarily super kind to them, which is what made me worried. But the fact that it is getting changed for us yet again might quell some of that worry, but I do agree that they should treat that type of a product to be more special and be more enticing, even if you do own some of those cards. Like, it gives you a reason to re-own them, either to foil or defoil, depending on your personal tastes. I also think the reboot sets are also a good opportunity to be able to fix errated cards. Like that's a
Hmm.
good opportunity to fix the errated cards that needed some text change. We saw that with the premium little box that combined, like, it had 2 packs of 1.0 and 2 packs of 1.5, and it was like $20, and they put the fixed version of those cards in those packs. So that almost made it a superior product when you found the correct text on those cards. Um, I'm not. I do think I like the idea of doing the greatest hits of set zero or block zero, which is sets 1 through 5, and kind of like incrementally doing that each year. So like next year, if they do that type of a product, it'll be the greatest hits from block one. And then the year after that will be the greatest hits from block two, and kind of just keep up that type of a pace where it's like if you don't want the product, you don't need to buy it. But if you do kind of want it and you're new to the game, that is like the perfect product to buy. So it's definitely really interesting on what they could potentially do with it. Um, and I think the community's outcry was definitely well justified, and I think Bandai's solution to it, on pen and paper, is definitely a good step in the right direction. But I do also think community outcries could also work as like a double-edged sword and a monkey's paw situation, where some people really like the reprints, some people really hate the reprints. You're
I
never
mean,
going to
even
appease everyone, and that kind of leads us into where we are with BT11 and the abysmal pull rates of BT11, which is kind of interesting because we were just saying cards should be harder to get, you should be incentivized to buy more boxes, but I don't necessarily think that the approach they took with BT11 is the correct approach.
well, I mean, the to respond to what you just said first.
Oh, you're good.
The um, there's a difference between like I want to be able to open 5 boxes and have a full playset of everything, and I want there to be more like variance in my boxes because the low pull rates are annoying when it also equates with low value. It's like, okay, I opened 4 boxes of BT11 and I got 2 copies of Hades Force. It's not going to make Hades Force an expensive card. It just means I have to now go on TCG Player and buy a $2 card for $4 shipping.
It
Like,
inadvertently could make the cards more expensive just
I mean,
because
Cool
now the
Boy got to like
demand.
what, $4 or $5, and that was in everything. Every deck ran like 3 to 4 copies of Cool Boy for a solid 2.5 sets. No other card is going to hit that level of general playability.
You have, going back to like the larger set size with Special Booster 1.5, that had Davis, that had Lady Devimon from BT3, that had BT3 jamming Vmon. Those were very expensive rares, and they're
Yeah,
still pretty expensive rares.
those are
So,
expensive rares in a time frame where you ran Vmon in every deck that was blue. Back in the time frame where you ran Lady Devi in every deck that was purple. That was, you're only running Hades Force in Greymon decks, which maybe is most of them still, but
I mean, Greymon's got a lot of. He's going to be getting a lot of different variants.
the point is that you're not running Vmon in, you're not running Hades Force in non Greymon decks, which is, there's only so many Greymons, even though there are a good number of them. It's not as many as there are like decks of just a color.
I mean,
Or
when
Davis was the only memory tamer that was playable at the time.
it all comes down to supply and demand. Whether it's played in one deck versus 20 is to be determined, but if it's harder to attain an individual card, it still is theoretically going to make the card have a slightly higher price tag. Cool Boy, back to your example, is now still a highly played card, and because the set isn't necessarily being printed as much, it technically is already out of print, but you could still go and buy boxes of BT9. Cool Boy's already jumped up to 7, and depending on how hard the rare is to get and how playable it is, still could mean that they could have a higher price tag. And it's not even just the rares in BT11 that are harder to get, it's also the supers, just because the supers also decreased. So if anyone's unfamiliar with how BT11 is being opened, right now you get 6 SRs, if I recall, and then you get 4 campaign rares, which are basically just alt art reprints. And then they decided to make all of the commons and uncommons foil as well, except that's going to take up a rare slot because the rares are also foil. I don't know if that's like a printing thing based on how sheets are printed for cards, but it's definitely a lot harder to get a lot of these like middle high rarity cards. I think secrets probably are untouched. I again don't have case ratio information to confirm or deny that. And then obviously commons are now overbloated now that you're seeing commons also in foil that are taking up that rare slot. So it's just making rares and supers a lot harder to get.
Yeah. And the point I was gonna make before was the uh I think there's also the RB1 as a reprint sent as a greatest hits or whatever also including new cards is I think um a perfect idea of what I imagined like the Digimon core sets would be. Anyone familiar? Magic the Gathering does core sets every year after rotation, usually in the summer, which I think is when RB will fall. And um,
Well, it
what they
got
do with
delayed, so it would have fallen there.
would have been in the summer, point being, is they basically there's usually some amount of staples of cards that are always included in Magic, and I say like not always, and a lot of them are pretty bad. They're draft chaff, but there's at least a purpose for them because Magic is meant to be drafted as opposed to Digimon, whose the cards that are bad are just meant to be thrown away or used for like bedding for your hamster cage. Um, and but what they also do is because they are constantly reprinting these certain cards, like I don't know, um, like Duress. Duress is a card that's been reprinted a bunch of times, and
Cancel.
what that also cancel.
That's the card
uh,
I always dread. Cancel because it's a counter spell.
Um, yeah, like it's not a super efficient one, but it is one. And what but what you also do with that as you're reprinting these cards over and over and over again is, and it I promise you, it for anyone that's never played a card game like this, it sounds confusing. It really isn't. It just reading the card it explains the card. Um, and Magic they take naming convention significantly more seriously, so you don't have the problem of I cast Agumon and they're like, okay, what does that mean? That could mean 100 different things. But what they do have is um, different iterations of the same printing. So you could have, you know, cancel from core set 2014 and cancel from core set 2015 and cancel from Return to Ravnica. And they all have the same text, they all have the same mana cost, but they all have different um, portraits, different actual pictures on the card. So, man, I really liked the art for the 2014 cancel. That's the one that maybe that's when I started the game and I really like it. And but they do that with a lot of different cards as they're reprinted like I mean most notably like basic lands. Basic lands. Anyone can play and most LGSs have a box of them that they actively hand out to people because people donate basic lands because nobody needs them. But everyone that's starting the game doesn't have this surplus of basic lands. So they give them out, and but then some people are like, oh man, I want to make sure every single basic land in my deck is a different art, or I want to have only this particular art of basic land, and some of them are super expensive. They have like the planetary foil lands from the newest unset. They're just basic lands. You could get 100 of them for like a nickel, but you could also pay $5 for one of them if you want this super special version of it. And that would be the perfect opportunity to reprint with new art these cards. Have like we already have different editions of certain things like tournament promos and whatnot, but truly having, so we have the original, like the unfoiled TK Takashi Yellow Tamer that everyone is kind of forced to use, and there's the box topper version of it, and then well, now there would be the RB1 version of it that would be a new art, maybe also foiled, because all rares should be foil moving forward, because that was a transition made later in the game. It's the perfect opportunity for that I think they're also missing the mark on.
I think it's the way that Bandai generally operates. They like to separate those types of designs and put them in the tournament packs. So the newest tournament pack, as an example, has Jamming Veemon as one of the primary cards. It's all reprints. Not a single card of these tournament packs are new, and it's it's used as an incentivization tool to get people to play in stores. And instead of, like, they could easily do exactly what you said and then just throw the thing into the booster box, make it harder to get, and it's more special when you do get it, yes, but they
I
just
wouldn't
want.
even say it's making it harder to get. It's making it easier to get. If anything, it's harder to get a pre-release promo
Well, it
because
depends on what slot it's taking up, because like we see with BT11, the campaign rares are exactly what you just described. Alternate art cards that are reprinted. These are the first time
but
these
they're
cards have been.
replacing other cards. These would be included in the number, right?
Uh,
This would be part of the 118 or whatever, 112. It would include, number 105 would be BT1 TK Takashi.
I'm not saying that you're wrong, because they've done that with the reboot booster. There was a small handful of cards that said this card is treated as uh promo Agumon '07 or something. So like they could take that approach, but I think based on the flavor of the sets, they just don't want to do it. They just don't. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
you
there's a lot of
could.
things they don't want to do.
Yeah, I mean, they could easily just say, all right, instead of having the yellow tamer that makes logical sense for the what's going on with the set, the theme of the set, instead it's just going to be TK just because it's TK. Like they don't want to do that, and they would rather say, okay, we have this nice alt art version of TK, let's just put them in the next tournament pack. So it it's a incentivization versus accessibility versus some other factors that are just all
Well,
compounding on each other.
I think that's the difference there. Like all iterations of new arts for Digimon has been exclusively alternate arts. These are not that. I mean, they are in theory because there's only one art. As soon as there becomes two arts, one is the alternate. But there is no alternate art for cancel. I mean, like you can look up I don't have that prepared, but
I think it's just
um
how they think of their own game. Like,
there's yeah, what, one, two, three, four,
because
five, six, seven.
they want
There are
the
at least
reprints to be
10 different
special.
printings of cancel. The core set 2021 is a lady with like a blue shield around her, and the core 2019 is the same thing. The Ixalan is a guy on a boat. That's pretty thematic. Like Amonkhet is also the circle. So that's probably like the generic,
I mean,
like
but
the
Magic
cancel
Magic
art.
is a completely different beast on how they approach their not only just card design but set design as well. Digimon's not trying to do what Magic is trying to do, is kind of where I'm getting at, and you're not necessarily wrong for thinking that they could do this type of stuff, which they easily could and they have done. It's just the frequency in which they do it. I don't I do think it deserves to be in a special product, but I don't necessarily think that they are doing it just based on the setup structure of how the game is. Kind of similar to why I don't think that they're going to ever do rotation, even though a lot of people for some reason want it. I don't think rotation would help the game at all, but
I'm
that's
further
just a
away from
personal
that
thing.
stance at this point only because there is a rotation. There just won't be. They'll never announce one. They'll never implement one. There's a rotation of your cards every time a new set comes out, which is
It's
way
a soft
faster than Magic
rotation.
rotates. It's a soft rotation because if you try and play a deck that was meta through two sets in the past, in any sort of competitive sense, you get rolled over. And that is a rotation, even if you don't want to say it is.
I mean, that's why I said it was a soft rotation. But like, I don't know. BT11 is just an interesting beast, and the funny thing is, people asked for the commons and uncommons to be foiled, and again, this goes to the monkey paw situation where it's just like, okay,
Hmm.
we asked for it, Bandai listened, and now we don't like it. So, like, it kind of almost hurts the relationship between us and Bandai if enough of that goes on, because it's just like, okay, what are they going to ask for this time? What are we going to give them? And then they're just going to be upset. So it's like, what's the point on us appeasing them when they're just not going to like it at the end of the day? And it's not like we don't like it. It's just I feel like they don't necessarily experiment enough with it because they easily could have, to subsidize it, made a
Made it a
unfoiled.
box topper or something.
Yeah, there's no. I don't think there is a box topper to this.
That's what I mean.
The art packs are on the side of the box, kind of like how dash packs were. They're not inside it.
Ooh.
Yeah. So the art competition winner packs, they're supposed to be coming out with BT11. Those are on the side. They're not inside of the booster boxes. But you are supposed to get one with each booster box that you get.
Ooh, supposed to.
I know. But a lot of people suggested, okay, if you could easily turn every single card into a foil, you could turn every single card into an unfoil. You could change how packs are distributed so that way we're guaranteed at least one unfoil rare. So that way we don't lose a rare slot, and that could eat up a common slot just because commons are easily the most, like, they're commons for a reason. So they could have adjusted the booster box to make it more friendly for the change, but for whatever reason they didn't. There's a whole mess behind printing logistics that I only know very very mild surface level of,
I
but
mean, no, well, I think, I mean, this is an old argument. I'm pretty sure I've rehashed this once before, but as far as Blizz or Bandai is concerned, um, the uh, a card is a card, whether it's foil or non-foil, sometimes affects things, but they send in a printing order, they receive, they supply art, they get cards printed. It costs them the same amount of money to print a you know common Agumon as it does for them to print a secret rare Omnimon. And
actually foiled printing is its own beast and they are more expensive, which
but
is why companies usually don't like.
they don't have to be. Is the point.
No,
They don't
the
have to make all the secret rares foil. But
oh,
the point of the
that's
argument
where
is
you're getting
is
at.
they
Okay.
don't they don't they don't recognize cost of card versus cost of printing. So, you know, and this is an argument taken back when, you know, it was for Ultimate Masters and Magic when there was this big problem when to sell Ultimate Masters because the last Master sets had all kind of failed and Magic had just started to lose their faith in their customer base, or Wizards was. They instituted a buy a box promo outside a box again, which nobody likes, for Ultimate Masters, which included a Jace the Mind Sculptor. At the time, a very expensive card with minimal printings, but still had a couple printings that was hovering around $300. And that card, so basically all the products sold out immediately. Many people got confirmation emails that they had bought product that they then never had allocated to them, and there was a whole mess of people thought they had product and they didn't, or people, sometimes had more product than they wanted and were overcharged, and it was a big mess. But the point is that all the outrage was because of people really didn't necessarily want the box of Ultimate Masters. The Ultimate Masters was whatever, but how many times could you buy a booster box for I think $350 and get a card before you even open the booster box? The card you receive on top in a little individual pack is worth the price of the booster box. You could just turn around and sell it and make your money back. And that's really what before the price of that card came down, that's what was possible. And people were freaking out and they're like, I had two boxes in my cart and I got a confirmation email, and then you sent me a thing saying, "Oh, I was accidentally sent a confirmation email and that my confirmation email doesn't mean anything." And they could quell all of those concerns by just sending people a basic land because it costs the company the same amount of money to print a Jace the Mind Sculptor as it does a basic land. So they could just print Jace the Mind Sculptors out the ass and solve this problem. But so like this whole BT11 debacle with the campaign rares is they could just add them in addition to without replacing anything, and they just choose not to. That is an active choice.
Yes and no. They chose to have them be a foil printing, which in their perspective, price wise, takes up the foil sheet, which again goes
Add
into
more foil sheets.
that costs them more than a base rare sheet, which is why I think like the idea of just printing rares in unfoil wouldn't have been that bad of an idea, and then we just lose a common and then everything else is the same. And I think a lot of people would probably be okay with that, where it's just like you get what is it, 4 rares, then you'd get your 2 uncommons, then you'd get 1 unfoiled rare, then you'd get your foil common
Or
uncommon
rares. What are you
slot.
talking about?
I'm just
Or
I'm just throwing out numbers like based on
you get
seeding of
two
packs.
rares, 2 rares, 3 uncommons, and then 6. So you'd get an extra rare minus 1 common, so it'd be 6 commons,
Yes.
right?
Uh, Whatever the number is, the point of the example is they could have changed the packs to accommodate for the loss of the rare, because now in like a booster box setting, we are effectively losing like, I think it's like 15 rares per box, and then multiply that by a case. Like, there's just a lot of rares that just are now gone and they're harder to get as a result, which is what's causing these harder pull ratios. I'm not necessarily crying over the missing super rare, um, but it is more of the fact that it just, they could have done something different, and the monkey's paw just so happened to us wanting that, and it just so happened to be compounded with other issues. Because maybe without the campaign rares, that introduces 4 more rares into the pool, and maybe it softens the blow a little bit, because we saw this type of a problem with BT11 and how they did campaign rares, but there was only 2 campaign rares in those booster boxes. So like 2 or 3. It wasn't the
I
4.
think I still felt that.
Yeah,
Like I still remember
the rares were still slightly harder,
they were
yes,
still short
but they
printed.
weren't like this bad, because now you're missing actually a lot more rares than
And
2.
I think, I mean, the conversation always seems to turn back to this in recently, but um, that wouldn't be as much of a problem if the sets weren't designed the way that they were, because if you don't have a set that they release, I have to pull it back up, but you've got BT 11, and I'm looking at the full set list here minus alt arts because nobody cares, and you're trying to run Black War Greymon. So what do you need? You need, you know, probably 3 or 4 copies of Black War Greymon X Antibody, super rare. That's going to take you a couple boxes. You're not super upset if you only get one, or zero, I guess, in a box. Zero is unfortunate, but that's the game you play with SRs, but usually they're not too expensive. But when it really hurts is now you have to also go out of your way to look for Metal Greymon X Antibody, which you need 4 of. And it's a rare. You're probably not going to get 4. And then, Greymon X Antibody is a common, so you'll be fine there. But um, Agumon X Antibody is an uncommon. You might not even get 4 Agumon X Antibody in a box now. And that's really annoying for people that
No,
only
you
buy
you
maybe
definitely
a
will,
box.
because one can come in foil.
Oh, I guess that's fine. But
Yeah, you're seeing more commons and uncommons in the set now more than ever because of the inclusion of the extra
the point is they give you a box, and what they're really doing is when they sell you a box is they're selling you like 5 different puzzles just in one box. And you open that box and you're like, cool, I got plenty of the flower puzzle. I didn't get any of the race car puzzle, but I really wanted the race car puzzle. So let me buy another box. And oh, look, more flower puzzle. I now have enough to build 2 flower puzzles and still one incomplete race car puzzle. Because that's all these packages are portions of a whole, but they're self-contained. There's nowhere else you can go to replace Metal Greymon X Antibody. It is exactly what it is. Now there are, budget alternatives or alternatives for different lists if you don't want to run exactly like the list everyone's expected to run. But if you're playing a Black War Greymon deck, especially a Black War Greymon X Antibody deck, you need 4 copies of this rare, and rares shouldn't be this hard to get.
I definitely would agree with that, which is where a lot of people's concerns are. Again, I think that the compounding
Or at
issue is the
least
campaign rares adding or more like subtracting rare slots. I think they're actually subtracting the super rare slots more than the rare slots, and it's just the quantity of the foil commons and uncommons. Like I think the foil, I don't know how many foil commons or uncommons come in a booster box per se, because I have yet to open a full booster box to count them myself. But depending on the quantity, they could have easily just reduced the quantity and just have still had rares be slightly harder to get, but not like astronomically hard. Like I like the idea of like one box has basically one copy of each rare. I like that idea. And if you make it so like okay, maybe one or two is like shorted based on just case ratio or just how packaging and seating works, fine, whatever. It still wouldn't hurt the price of the rares. I don't know how the price of the rares is going to be affected by this. Again, some of them are probably going to start jumping because of the fact that the rares are just harder to get now. But
Hmm.
I don't think it's going to be like that bad. Like it maybe will turn a card that was 50 cents into a card that's like maybe $1 or $2. I could also be wrong on that, and it could still be
I
50
mean,
cents, but
Metal Greymon X antibodies only pre-sales always like a ridiculous number that you should never buy anything for, and it's only $3.
I mean
So
that's pre-sale price, so you could just
that's
take the
higher than it should be.
Yeah, that definitely is way higher than it should be. That's more than um
I think I
some of
think
the
that's another thing
supers.
too. Like rares should have more value. Like there are the outlier rares. Like I know Davis was like $15 at one point. TK was like almost $20 at one point. Um, but rares shouldn't be like vendor, you know, trash. Like they really should have some base value to it, and because that's something, if you have rares that have value, then you can uphold the base value of a set, and it's something that when like people that I know that do EVs, or expected values for boxes, they discredit everything less than $1 as chaff. They don't include its value at all. I don't care if you could technically, like, as a bulk rate of, you know, every 100 cards is like a nickel or a dime or something. It doesn't matter. It's kindling, and but everything above a dollar at least sees some value additive to a trade or an exchange of some kind. Like if you want to trade an $18 card for a $20 card, throw in two rares that are worth $1, and you've got yourself a more equitable trade. But the problem is that basically cards are only worth like, you know, 5 or more dollars, or they're just like absolutely worthless. And the rarity doesn't even really imply that much either.
No, because we get supers that literally come out and they're like, "Oh, here's the base
60
price.
cents.
Yeah, here's $1 super rare." It's like, cool. That felt great to open, and then you get the more like sought after super rare, and so it's like, oh man, this
Or
is a $10 super rare. But like super rares, just as a whole, usually aren't necessarily that expensive. It's like your average one is like on the high side $5. The hot one is like $7 to $10, and then most of them are like $2 or less. They're like on par with normal rares at times in
or you
terms of
even get like
price.
because I remember it happened with Searcher, but Vemmon meme deck, but you need many Vemmon, and you actually don't get that many Vemmon from a box as opposed to every other common, and because you can run a lot of them, it's a 50-cent common.
I mean, that's just the price we pay for that type of card and deck being designed.
Hmm.
But at least like the benefit of the smaller set means that you see it more often, and they actually printed that card in a higher prevalence. So on like a printing sheet, it could have been two cards on that printing sheet dedicated to searchers, which means that it was being printed more than any other common, and yet it's still, just because of the sheer number that you would need, a super highly sought after card just because of the quantity.
Yeah, everyone that needs it doesn't need four of them. They need like 20 of them.
Yeah, right. And
But
depending on the deck and how it uses it, because Eosmon had its own with the level 5 Eos, but you're not running 20 of that card. You're usually running like maybe 10, 12, 15 at most if you're feeling frisky.
hmm
So
so
there's just a lot of compounding issues inside of BT11, and that's kind of why people are just like, I don't want the small set of RB1 in its, or it used to be in its existence of like a super small set. Like that's why I think, like, going back to almost the viewer question, uh slightly larger set sizes could help. I don't think that they need to be 300 card sets, but like maybe up it to like 120, see how that goes. Maybe up it to, if they really wanted to, 130, 140, or even as high as 150. I don't think, like, based on how they want to give us cards, they need to go higher than 150, cuz that would put us in like on par with special booster 1.5 box rates, pull
hmm
rates, and I think that was pretty okay. And then they just made it easier with BT4. You could go back into my YouTube channel and like watch my reactions to the changes in like pull rate distributions, and kind of see my surprise, be like, oh my god, it's even easier to get these cards. This is great. And I think that's part of the appeal of Digimon, is just how accessible the card game is. And part of the outcry was we wanted it to be more accessible, and part of this outcry is this is less accessible. So it's definitely an accessibility issue. When it comes to what we want, we just want things not necessarily to be like piss easy, but we want things to still be easy enough to where we could get whatever we need to play the game to begin with.
yeah, because ultimately, regardless of your competitive goal, if you're just playing at locals or if you're playing, potentially at Nats in the next couple weeks, like the full spectrum, you still want the cards to play the deck that you want to play. And if you don't and you can't, then you're upset.
Correct.
So that kind of seems to be the nature of the issue, unfortunately, which, because, I mean, Digimon's been in a pretty lull. Says there was just so long since the last release, and then especially immediately coming upon the last ban restriction announcement that kind of took all the, or some of the creative deck building and the changes in the format kind of like away before we even really had a chance to play with them. Um, this is the first time a lot of people, I know myself included, I took a decent break from physically playing the game for a while, just because there wasn't a whole lot going on, and there are plenty of other hobbies that people can partake in.
I definitely feel the burnout or lull sentiment, where it's just like, okay, if nothing's gonna happen, there's no real incentive for me to play. I do think like that's more of an organized play structure failure. Like they could have easily ran something in January just to keep people like entertained and active. Offered some sort of special reprint promo just to entice people even more. Like, I don't know if people notice this, but we get reprints actually quite a lot and quite often. It's just it doesn't feel
We
that
get
way
some garbage
because
ass reprints
I,
though. Not gonna
yes.
lie, we
So
get some pretty F tier reprints.
some of it comes from the card's popularity, and then some of it comes from the time frame in which they thought it was a good idea. So like we've seen
That
cards where it's just like, "Oh,
that's the
this would
problem. They
be
just
no, like
wait.
it's
That's the
just a
disconnect.
it's not necessarily disconnect. It's just the price of being reactive based on how printing cards works. It's like, oh,
No, it's
um
the problem of printing a card and 6 months later that card being irrelevant because
no, but it took
they
6 months to print the card when it was relevant. Therein lies the actual issue. It's just like this
yeah
card was relevant 6 months ago, but it took
just
six
don't make
months to
the
get it
cards
out.
be irrelevant in 6 months.
That's
So
easier said than done, though. In
yeah,
some
but it's easier than
cases.
speeding up the printing process. One's a manufactural like societal thing. You're not changing the
Well, they can't
factory schedule.
necessarily guess that like
They
a
can
card
change the
is
meta of a card game. That's entirely within
yes.
their limits.
Yes, but if let's just say people I'm going to use Hexablau as an example. Let's say people
hmm
really liked Hexablau and everyone was taking to the deck and everyone really loved playing it. So Bandai would see that love and attraction, make a reprint, order that through the factories, and then it takes the factories 6 months is
Six
just an
months.
example time
Yeah.
frame, because obviously they could go to different printers and like it's its own beast. But I'm just using 6 months as just a generic number. 6 months down the line, we get that Hexablau reprint that everyone was asking for. 6 months later, and now nobody's playing the deck, and it's just like, oh, but you guys wanted this. Like we can only
Yeah.
do so much. They can't necessarily, like, yes, they could have
They could just
predicted
make
that.
Hexablau good for 6 months.
That's easier said than done sometimes, because most of the
It's
time
not.
they don't necessarily know the impact of what they're making.
Well, that's their fault.
No, it's
this is
not.
this
You
is the
can't
same
just come out.
problem.
uh, I mean, look at I hate to pick on Magic and keep going back
Go
to Magic,
ahead.
but like look at Rot Priest. Like Rot Priest
Hmm.
is clearly one of the dumbest cards they've printed in a long time.
Hmm.
And like they don't know the full impact of that card. Granted, there's so many other formats and so many other things to look at when it comes to that Wizards just gives up and they don't care. But you can't necessarily 110 predict what everyone is going to be doing, what everyone is going to be playing, and what is even popular or possible. Like, people still like Hexablaumon and are happy for that reprint, but yes, nobody is playing a Hexablaumon deck because, not necessarily because it's not good. It was good. It's just when we got it, it was just too late. It's like with the security rookies. It's like we're getting the security rookies the equivalent of like what, 3-4 sets later than they came out in Japan. Most of those cards, the relevancy's gone. So like, oh, we're finally getting these cards and they don't matter. That's such a shame. But that's more of like a timing on when they're releasing that rather than like, oh, this is a reprint we think people would like. But the same type of issue is kind of in that same style as sentiment, where it's just like people would want, let's just say Black War Greymon as an example. Black War Greymon's hot right now. It's super hot in Japan, and now it's starting to be phased out of the meta. I don't know if it's going to continue to be phased out, but 6 months down the line, they have zero idea if Black War Greymon is still going to be the best deck. They didn't even know that Melga was as good as it was until the US got it, or not necessarily US, but the English audience and the English side got it, and they had zero idea. They looked at the Japanese stuff and said, "Okay, Melga's gone. Cool. That means it's going to go away in Japan or in English and nobody's going to have to worry about it, and it's not really that big of a deal or big of a problem." And then here we are, it existing for 3 whole sets, and people are
Hmm.
pissed, and they use that, and like maybe in 2-3 months we'll see a Metal Gurumon X Antibody reprint with a nice alt art, and then it's just like, oh, it's nobody's playing the deck anymore. Huh, that's weird. Like they
I mean,
just don't know.
well, they don't know because they're weirdly like bad at knowing how good their own things are. In
That's
and
most card games though.
feel like that's most Japanese card games because while obviously Magic's got its stains, and I don't play standard Magic. I haven't played standard Magic in a while. I mean, I'll be upfront about that. I play Digimon. It's the only card game I'm actively playing at the moment outside of Commander, which don't play Digimon Commander. Don't even try and make Digimon Commander. That's bad, and you're bad. But um, the point is there Magic has existed as long as it has for a reason. You know, do I agree with its current direction? Not necessarily. Do I agree with any of Hasbro's business practices? No. But you have to study your past as not to repeat it. And Magic's been around for what, 30 years now. So they're clearly doing something right. And not to, really break open a whole case study here because I know we don't have time for that, nor do many people care for that. But at least for the basis of the argument that Magic or Digimon is within their means to make cards relevant for longer periods of time. If they want to pump and dump and milk a card game over a 2 or 3 year cycle, they can and are within their power to do so. But Magic hasn't existed as long as it has because it doesn't do that. Maybe it does in the short run. Maybe there are time periods where they really ran up the power level, Throne of Eldraine, and they fixed that. They acknowledged they were wrong and they fixed it via a rotation and some bans, but they fixed it. And like so, the whole the root end of the short run of this conversation, at least, is given our time span for today, is that I'm just looking at a standard deck list from MTG Goldfish. Again, I don't play standard. I just pulled up a deck list and I was flipping through the cards, and the amount of cards in this deck that are about to rotate out, meaning they are over a calendar year old, is significantly larger than anything you would even remotely see in Digimon. Outside of maybe some of the basis, like foundational of the card game cards. Like, what's the oldest card in Black War Greymon?
It would be BT5 Agumon.
Which, okay, so BT5 is even a lot more recent. There's no BT1 cards at all in it. No,
If you really want to, starter deck Greymon.
I guess. Well, BT5 came out in
That's
August.
Block Zero. That's the tail end of Block Zero.
That no, I need a time frame. Like, so that was
It would
August
be
of
August.
2021.
Yes, 2 years
Okay,
ago.
so that's you know a little older, but so um just again flipping through. I don't have time to do numbers. I don't have time to do ratios, but there's a good number of this is just an Esper mid range. Esper being um blue, white, black, and um it's running uh let's go AO the Dawn Sky from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, which came out over a year ago today. And that's one of the premier cards in this deck. That's one of the biggest. It's a mythic rare. Like, how many secret rares that came out in what came out a year ago today? BT7. How many secret rares from BT6, 7, or 8 are still played? None.
Um, no, Lucimon,
In what deck?
Mastimon.
Is it?
Yes, they still play at least a Tech One of Lucimon, just because they need some
It's
sort of
not the face
Tamerade.
of the deck, though.
No,
No.
but the set literally right after that is Mastimon.
Hmm.
Like it is the starter deck of Mastimon, which the core of the starter deck is still everything that's being ran inside of Mastimon,
But, so, again, because I know
which
there
is
are older
almost a year
cards
old at
here.
this point, being from BT8.
There are older cards here
And
too. I don't
then
know how relevant they are, but they're
BT1
here.
Magna Angemon's in there as well, sometimes as a Tech 1 of, or even more, depending on the deck build.
And well, the starter decks were also printed to be that foundation that cards in sets sometimes even aren't, because
Yeah,
as
but
we've
that's
seen
kind
now
of
with
how Magic is to a
BT11,
degree. It's like, oh, the stupid set that just came out for Magic, those cards are going to be in for a long time, and based on where the game's trajectory is, that is the most powerful set out of all of the sets that preceded it. So a lot of those cards, soft rotation, is going to be played just
yeah,
because
but
of the mechanics involved with it.
I don't know. And again, it's a larger conversation that we've had before, but if I say I'm playing Esper mid-range, name a card in my deck, because you can't, because it
I don't
depends.
I don't know the
Well,
context of
I mean,
Magic.
you'd have to know the context, but
Yeah,
the
I'm
point
like,
being, like Esper mid, that just means I'm playing a blue, yeah, a blue, white, black mid-range deck, or Grixis, or I mean, I guess I could use. I'm playing mono white mid-range, the current most popular deck. I'm not. This isn't. No, I'm just gonna look for the deck card. This isn't Anointed Peacekeeper. That there's four of that in this deck. This isn't Wandering Emperor. This is mono white, because as soon as Wandering Emperor rotates out, maybe mono white gets worse, but you just replace Wandering Emperor with something else that tries to maybe do the same thing. If there's even remotely anything close that does the same thing. And I mean, it's a fucking mythic rare planeswalker. It probably can't be replaced in the same capacity. But if I lose Black War Greymon, I just can't play Black War Greymon because there's only Black War Greymon.
well, I think that's just the differences in the card games though. Like Magic is designed completely differently. Digimon always had those hints at wanting to be archetypical from the very beginning, because of how Digimon are and how they work. They want these supposed evolution lines, and they're designing basically
Well,
one evolution line to be the main focus of the deck and then everything else to support that idea. And the more an archetype gets support, the more expansive that becomes, as we're going to see with Greymon as a whole, because of all of the different ways that we could play Greymon. We have red Greymon, we have black Greymon, we even have red yellow Greymon, which means he could be put into the red Greymon, which could intersect with the red black Greymon, and it opens the doors to what actually is a Greymon deck at that point. Like what constitutes it, and the naming sake is from the main megas. It's like, oh, you're playing a Black War Greymon even though you're using red yellow cards. Like, okay, sure.
um, so because I at least want it to be known, because I've made this argument many times with, to more or less success depending upon the day and like the words I choose. But I at least want those that are listening, that those still do care at least a little bit, to be aware of my position and why I am speaking the way I'm speaking. And I'm gonna try and justify like my idea. Obviously, it's not the game developers' idea. Otherwise, they would make different decisions. And also, my idea isn't necessarily correct, because everyone's allowed to have opinions. But um, when I think of Digimon, I don't necessarily think of Agumon, Greymon, Metal Greymon, War Greymon. I think of, and I sent you a link, something more akin to the Digimon video games, more akin to this specifically are the evolution paths of the vital bracelets. And these aren't even super complicated trees. But like, you get the dinosaur roar. We could probably just include this link. So if anyone wants to try and follow along in the YouTube description or in the podcast description, they can look at this too. But dinosaur roar vital bracelet. You know, you get a Bodemon that digivolves into a Koromon that digivolves into, depending upon conditions of the environment, Agumon or Black Agumon. And then, depending upon conditions of environment, Agumon can go into either Greymon or Monochromon or Dark Tyrannomon. And Dark Agumon, Black Agumon, can go into either Monochromon or like a Black Greymon or Dark Tyrannomon. And this is the point, is that we're already at the level 4, and there are 6 Digimon represented here. This isn't Agu Gray, Metal Gray, War Gray.
Yeah,
That's only one potential.
you're asking for more of like a reverse pyramid where your bottom is really small but your top is very expansive.
Yeah, Agumon can go into, like, based, because, Agu goes into Gray, who can go into 2 or 3 different things to go into 2 to 3 different things. Yeah, like a reverse pyramid, like, and obviously the card game is less structured that way, physically, but it could be where you could have, you know, like in the Greymon decks, a couple Agumons, but they don't all have to go into Greymons. They really don't. You don't need BT5 Greymon and Starter Deck Greymon and BT8, the Red Black Greymon, and now the BT11 Black Red, or that's BT12, the like just Greymon X antibody and the Black Greymon X antibody. Like, you could have monochromons, which they do exist, they're just bad. They could have tyrannomons, they exist, they're just bad. Like, you could have other things that Agumon can canonically digivolve from as choice options for a deck that would allow you to have more flexibility, and you wouldn't have to lean in on exclusive name-based archetypical synergies. You could still make it Agumon themed by making it things that Agumon comes from without having to say so explicitly. And
That would I like the idea that you got. I think they
it's
would have to
harder.
change. Yeah, it would be way harder, and they'd have to change a lot about how they do like card design in order to accommodate that.
You'd have to just lean
I
more into the
think
colors than you do the actual. names.
Yeah, like I like the idea of what they have done with Beelstar, where it's just like it cares about 7 costed options, and then it's up to you to figure out how to actually make the off-color ones work, because it has its
Hmm.
core package where it's just like ignore color if it's a Three Musketeer, ignore color if it's a Three Musketeer. Oh, it's already on color, but you can ignore it for the other Three Musketeers. And then literally you could just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna run this like red blue tamer, and now I could run red blue options just because now I have that tamer to unlock that, which then opens up the doors to more options for me to play to handle different situations. Like I like those types of decks, but they are harder to design and harder to balance for.
Yeah, it's just because I think that's really like the game that I'm not seeing. I'm not asking for them to make Magic. Like I said, I'm not even playing Magic. But what I'm asking them to make is a game that, you know, I don't sit down and pull out my Agumon to fight your Greymon and already know, like, I mean, even if you included other things, right? Like, it's not difficult for somebody to know 80% to 90% of your deck in Magic by seeing a first couple cards, especially once they have experience with it, and then the more fine-tuned competitive lists have fewer choices to really be made. But the point is, it's not just 4 4 4 4 4. I've made my deck. Like, I
It
mean, even
it
this list
end
I'm
up would
looking at
be.
right now in Magic is 3 2 4 2 3 2 2. Those are the creatures.
I mean
Like,
the
there's only
the
one four of.
the thing is with Digimon and basically any card game is you will hit that optimization point, and if that optimization point is still just using Agumon into Greymon X, like the rest of the evolution line is kind of pointless. It's like, yes, they could do a more optimized version for those off Digimon, sure, but again, now you're ignoring the rest of the options because there is just one clear answer. And there's always going to be that one clear answer in a more optimized setting. There's not necessarily that much room for different flexible variants, which is where the Agumon in BT12 and some of the future formats, because of how supported it is, it actually does become a little bit harder because of all of the different interactions that they have, and they're all just good. So like again, things open up when there's more cards available to it. And again,
I think we're just going
then
in the other
things will
direction with
go,
that. I
well,
think we're going away from like the choices, and I know we're kind of going over on time, and but this is like my piece on the idea that, you know, I guess I should have started from the more recent stuff. BT11. I'm just clicking on Garudamon. Inheritable. You may play a red tamer with a play cost of 4 a lust from your hand without paying its memory cost. Okay, that's actually pretty generic. Um, so the Bergermon, Garudamon virus deck cares about, or vaccine, I'm sorry, cares about, red tamers. Cool. I learned that from one card. Um, I go back and I read the 1.0 Garudamon, and she doesn't have an inheritable. The 1.5 Garudamon um has, when this Digimon is blocked, to draw one. It also has piercing. So look at that. When this Digimon is blocked, it doesn't say when this Greymon is blocked. It doesn't say when this X antibody is blocked. It doesn't say when this BT8 Metal Greymon is blocked. When this is blocked,
well, you
it is an
also get
inheritable
that.
ability. You could Digivolve Garudamon into Breakdramon or War Greymon. Like, I mean, if now with all the multicolor shenanigans, you could Digivolve this red level 5 into a yellow red level 6 and really break what, that draw one when you're blocked. But
I
the point
mean,
is that you can make an ability that somebody wants to include in a deck that doesn't have to say a name of another card or
depend
a function of cards.
depending on the style of deck, yes, I do kind of agree with that. But again, because some of the name based are just name with in its name, you still have options and opportunities to do more than just, oh, this specifically 110% needs to digivolve into Greymon X Antibody to work. Like, you could still use BT8 Greymon with War Greymon. It's just caring about any Greymon that can go on top of it. Theoretically, if there was a Dragonkin level 5 Greymon that could digivolve on top of a level 5, that would even still work. It doesn't necessarily matter. Same thing with all of the Omnimons. It just needs to be an Omnimon. It doesn't care what Omnimon it is. It's literally the same thing, just with a slightly tighter window. But again, as something gets more supported, that window becomes then larger and larger.
I
And
think, and I'm struggling here to search for it. Um, Actually, I found it. Um, the difference being, um, so this is actually the full suite, and this number lies, but there are currently 55 level 6 Greymons in print. I guess that probably is including alt arts.
yeah, it's
That is
probably including all.
37. 37. Many of them are alt arts. There are 37 level 6 Greymons. That's just level 6, including the word Greymon. That's everything from War Greymon BT1 to uh, EX4 Kresgarurumon. Um, Now, that's a lot. There's a lot of variance there, you know, technically. Um, Now, it's lying a little bit because Shoutmon DX is included here too. But so if you want to run a Greymon deck and you want to run a Greymon as your level 6 and all your inheritables say Greymon, there are plenty of cards you can choose from. Most of them are wrong, but they do exist. But there are also, at the current moment, not including 82 red level 6s total. So if you just want to run a red level 6, you have 82 options. Or, you know, if you want to run, because maybe there's some dual colors in there, you can also include like Shoutmon X5B is red blue. Like there are like however many options they want to print and make for Greymons, and then the Greymon deck has choices to make in which Greymon they Greymon, then you could have way more options by, okay, what effect do I want based on the Digimon that is printed? And you don't want to make a deck, because I know this is an argument that's been made too, that you don't want a deck that just has like, it's kind of like a do-all catch-all deck that I could have my level 5, you know, Melga X that digivolves into my level 6, War Greymon, and it just does everything and is the best deck and everyone runs the same, 40 cards. But color-based, restrictions exist, and as long as we continue not to ignore them, they restrict deck building enough themselves to where, are you running the black Greymon deck or the red Greymon deck or the red-black Greymon deck? And there should be some compromises and downsides to running the red-black deck. Unless maybe you're running like the red-black deck, but that's BT12, right?
Yeah, but there still is, because I've even seen this on something like on some of my videos where it's just like, I never thought of using that tech card that you're using in this manner, because it's just so off of their radar, and here I am introducing it to them, like Sukamon, Maki.
Poop Tribal.
Yeah, Poop Tribal. There's like two main variants. You could play it either black based or yellow based. Most people are going to end up playing it black based because the rest of the deck kind of synergizes with the black cards. You could do some very interesting stuff with the yellow base in recovery, and you could splash in a purple tamer to try to run Flame Hell Scythe, because a lot of your level 5s are 6000 DP or less, so you could trigger their on play abilities. So that was a pretty interesting take. Or on the black side, people didn't even know that Maki was a card, and it's just like, oh, these are 2-color Digimon, and this cares about 2-color Digimon, specifically 1 color being black. That just works. And like, there's still a lot of freedom to be had in Digimon deck design, even with some of the constraints that we had. Like, people in Blue Flares could consider running Yu Yakuga just because it cares about Greymons. But what are you running? blue Greymons. So you could digivolve your level 5 Metal Greymon into level 5 Decker Greymon, still get Yuya Kuga's ability off, and that card has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of what Blue Flares is doing. So, like, you still have lots of intricate, like, interesting synergies that you could just line up together because of just how things are currently structured. Yes, for the most part, it is kind of easy, but not everyone kind of gets that. And people still want to, like, have their own different levels of discovery based on just what they see, what they have, and what they pull, and how they pull.
I mean, yeah. I think the hardest part for me is that when I look at a new set, I can't look at every card. I can look at the super rares and the secret rares, and that tells me what deck I'm playing.
I mean,
I
that's
look at
that's a good
BT11.
start.
I look at BT11, and I see Phoenixmon, Marsmon, Shout 7, Ulforce, Mirage Gao, GG, Black War X, Merva, Bagra, and then Mirai. So these are the decks that are playable in BT11. You know, the Vaccine deck, slash the Marsmon deck, because they're the same deck.
For
Shout,
now.
Shoutmon, Ulforce, Mirage Galmon's unplayable.
It's
GGmon's
just
unplayable.
not unplayable.
Black War, Mervamon, Bagramon's unplayable, even though I wish he wasn't. And then Mastamon support. And like, and that's the point, is that I can condense the 100 and something cards down to 10 and look at the 10 different decks that I could play and which 5 of them are going to be good.
And
Whereas
you
you
still have
can't
the
do that
you
with
still
Magic.
have you still have some of the other decks that like are still playable. Like even though Melga has a pretty bad Black War Greymon matchup, it's still good against basically anything not Black War Greymon. And yes, I get in a more competitive sense. Usually you want to try to run the deck that has the most wide way to be able to handle the field, which is why a lot of people are thinking, "Oh, Grandis is going to be such a good counter pick." It has literally one good matchup, and then it's like 50-50 on anything else or worse, just because you need to see your specific combo. If any deck can disrupt that combo, which some can, that are also good into Black War, then you're just actually boned. Like, you just can't win those matchups. So I don't necessarily think like that would be a good deck to take, but if that's the type of mindset people are in, I would rather take Melga versus Grandis, even though like Grandis is better into the one specific matchup. Melga's better against all of the other matchups that aren't necessarily that, if you're still kind of losing to it anyway, or at least being 50-50 with it.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
Grandis seen a total of 0 updates. 0. And people are still wanting to play it, and he's still a viable deck. So, like, that's not.
that's more a symptom of the card game's rules than it is like of, creative deck design. Any deck, like basically Grandis has just scraped the ceiling of decks that how quickly can I establish an OTK combo? And if anything's faster than Grandis, it pushes Grandis out of like feasibility. And Melga exists kind of in that same sense where Melga still sees play, not because Melga's doing anything creative, it just slams its head against the wall and sometimes breaks through to the other side. Any deck that can do what Melga does faster immediately just replaces it in the meta with, like, you could have made Poop Tribal a deck that when I swing with my Poopmons, it replaces itself with a Poopmon that gains Rush. And Poopmon would have replaced Melga because it would have done the same thing. Like, oh, I don't care if my Poop dies because another Poop comes out. And, you know, as long as you have that same timetable of like how fast you can win, then you'll always be in that scope of replacing those decks. Like
Yeah, but they haven't
that's
introduced a new one, and it's based on.
no, because if they did, the game may become like a turn two format.
Well, that like that's the good part, because we've reached a power ceiling that they're not willing to move from, but still can work under and operate under. And it's not like decks are necessarily hardcore replacing each other because of that. It's just what is the up at the very top and what is allowed to exist in that current environment based on that. So I like Grandis was not a real deck to play in EX3 because of Melga's existence. Melga just
Hmm.
beats it out. But because Melga is being taken down a notch, that allows a card and a deck like Grandis to be able to come up in its place, and they're from the same set, mind you. So like it is just more of like what the field looks like based on what's being played, and like yes, some of it is being replaced by the new decks, and a lot of the new decks, which is why I'm super hyped for the spoilers that we got from BT13. Some of the new decks just are support for older decks. Like you
Well,
see a lot of
yeah.
cards touching other decks that were older, like Phoenix Mon. People are going to write that deck off, and they should write that deck off for being competitive currently, but it's getting support in future sets. So it's like, oh, maybe it's still in the back of my mind that they're still playing around with its idea, and it could still be good. We see that with like Bloomlord, where it's like Bloomlord gets very, very small, intricate extra cards added in here or there that aren't necessarily adding to the deck, but it adds more options that you have with what the deck can do. And that's kind of the same sentiment that like Machine Dramon's been getting ever since its inception in EX1, where it's just like, oh, this new level 5 cyborg can make this really good. Oh, this new level 5 cyborg makes this really good. Oh, this new Machine Dramon makes this even better. Like it's just a slow increment. Some move faster than others depending on the level of support, but that's just the byproduct of any card game. It's just what the competitive environment is and what's being supported are two huge factors into how well a deck's success is, but older decks can still win sometimes.
I think I don't know. Maybe it's just more of the fatigue of because of Digimon's, I guess, comparatively limited like character design. Like like how many Greymons are there? Whereas Magic operates off of creating a unique, person or concept. It's,
Well, they
guy with
work off of
sword.
mechanics. It's like,
That's
what mechanic is this deck doing? Like white weenies as an example. It's like, I play white small things. Why? Because they are white and they are small things. Done. End of discussion. Replace the small things with new small things. Doesn't really matter. The deck is still the deck based on the mechanic it's trying to work with. And a lot of Digimon decks, it just so happens those mechanics are more archetypical rather than just uniquely color based.
but I mean, I think the point is like, as you said, there are new cards that are getting printed and new decks or older decks are seeing support. But the and there's the yes, new cards are seeing play, it's actually not that bad, but the appearance is less good to me because I'm not replacing, I'm just gonna grab two random names. Ambitious Farmhand with Spirited Companion, whereas one is a dog and one is a guy with a pitchfork. They're both one mana, white weenie cards. I'm replacing BT8 Greymon with BT12 Greymon. It's just Greymon. I'm replacing Greymon with Greymon. And maybe, if I'm lucky, I will get to replace Greymon with Greymon in BT13. Like,
I
you
mean,
know?
it you still have that option. Like there is uh a lot of expansibility in having lots of cards in a single archetype, as I keep hauling back to, because there's just more tech and tools. Do I run um BT9 X antibody Greymon, or do I run BT11 X antibody Greymon? Well, that depends on what your level 5 is. If your level 5 is a particular type of card, then that dictates what your level 4 is. Like, it all feeds into itself on how the deck is going to be designed, and it's not necessarily, I'm running this because it's Greymon, it's, I'm running this specific card because of the interactions I'm trying to get out of this other specific card, which is just what all card games are trying to do, is just that level of synergy. Why am I running this white weenie? Because it's a white weenie. What does white weenies work with? Anthems. I'm playing this anthem because I want to have this board of small things that just suddenly get big. It doesn't matter what the small thing is. Obviously, the stronger the small thing, the better it's going to
Mm-hmm.
perform. But that is just the core idea, and you're just changing out one part that's bad for another part that's good, that's doing functionally the same thing, because you're still trying to have that interaction that is the core combo of the deck.
Yeah. And I guess, as it as the deck archetypes change and as the structure and the environments change around them, there are also changes that are made, um, either in Anthem via a creature where you just have a guy that's just a lord and he gives +1/+1s to other, white weenies, or you've got an enchantment that just says all knights get +1/+1. So now you kind of want to lean more knights than you did previously, because it didn't matter that you ran this 2/2 or this other 2/2. They're both vanilla 2/2s, and one was a knight and one's not a knight, but now the one that's a knight matters more, so you want to run that one only for the duration in which that card is legal, and then it rotates out, and then that card therefore loses its time in the sun. But um, that's something that you just don't have
Well,
the
that's because
same
of just,
fidelity of.
I mean, you do and you don't at the same time. It's a lot more of a complicated problem when it comes to like deck and set design. And this is why I think like having a slightly larger set design and set just gives you more tools to be able to play with, which maybe would make getting to a more desired approach for you and how you would want to approach deck building to be more of that type of experience, just because again, more tools in the toolbox means you have more options to be able to work with, and the slow drip feed isn't necessarily doing it for you. But again, there's also certain decks like Security Control, like Beelstar, like Machine Dramon that don't necessarily have these clear-cut answers, just because of the expansive amount of like tools that it's trying to interact with. Because it's like, what does the ideal level 5 lineup for a Machine Dramon deck even look like? It's like, oh, well, you could use BT1 Metal Greymon, or you could use EX3 Cyber Dramon. They're both trying to DP boost. One does the job differently than the other, but the goal is to still try to DP boost. And there is no clear-cut answer based on the other types of level 5s you're trying to interact with to be able to build that stack based on how Machine Dramon's trying to play with. So, like, there are things that we have and decks that we have. It's just not everything is like that.
Well, so I'm really gonna peel back some layers here. Back to, I think, one of the more original things I stated. What kind of started this tangent to begin with is that the frustrations of people pulling rares in a pack or in a box stems from Bandai providing more or less complete packages in a single, you know, shotgun attempt, right? If you want to play the most, recent iteration of Black War Greymon, or you want to play the Vaccine Red Tamer deck, or you want to play the new Ulforce, you need the new stuff. You cannot necessarily just take your old Ulforce deck and just slap BT11 Ulforce in there. That's not the same deck, even if it's the same name. And that's a little misleading, and it's a little unfortunate, because someone who's been a big Ulforce fan for a long time and has maintained their Ulforce deck is now getting new support, and they're really happy about it. And just to learn that they might as well have not kept that deck, and they're basically building a new one anyway.
Well, I mean, you could still use a lot of those. Like this is where I think like decks kind of. This is where the soft rotation comes in, where it's like you have your initial line that is the start of a deck. Usually, when you get that initial line, the very first time, you just fill whatever you could throw inside of it to make it function. Then you get a next wave of support that gives you your second line. So now you have that second line to start to work with in combination with that first one, and then you have even less options in terms of like the various other cards that you're doing. Then you get your third wave of support, and then that third wave of support is going to start phasing out that first wave, but you're still going to keep that second wave because it's still doing something similar to what the deck is trying to do. And that's kind of like the cycle that Digimon is trying to play with, is not necessarily to like permanently phase out cards, but to like at least it make you stop and think about the different options that you have based on the new line. And yes, the new line is usually going to be the one that they want you to play more often because that's, the new hotness. But if there's older stuff to play with it, that's still on the table. Like, you still theoretically, in your All Force deck, could use BT2 All Force as, like, the off mega, the tech 2 of. Is it going to be the best option? No, but it's still an option.
Yeah, and I think the the examples are harder with the decks that have fewer examples because I mean we talk a lot about Black War Greymon now, it's the new hotness, but you know, Greymon received a line many times. There's many Greymons. It's the Charizard, right? It's um constantly receiving support in almost every set, and but we're at the point now where okay, I've replaced my BT9 or Greymon X antibody deck. I keep hitting the back button even though that's not how Digimon Card Not Dev works. Uh my BT9, red War Greymon X antibody deck with my BT11 black War Greymon X antibody deck. Okay, I'm not getting rid of everything. I'm just getting rid of some things. With my BT12, now I'm getting rid of more things. Now I've almost removed all of the old, like the BT9 cards, and then now we're going to BT13, which I think is the first time we actually don't have explicit Black War Greymon support for a while.
No, you could tech in like the yellow red Agumons sometimes, but that depends on the
There's not
eggs
a
that
whole
you're
line of
running.
support though.
Yeah, like it's more of like depending on the style of deck, you get like maybe a couple of cards to play with, but nothing like insane. But it goes and depends on what your intended outcome is based on the evolutionary lines that Bandai designs and what tech from those evolutionary lines you want to use, because there still is a decent argument depending on the cards that you play. At least in BT11 with Black War Greymon, you could build a more defensive black variant, or you could build a more offensive red variant, or you could even just cut out Black War Greymon entirely and still just run Greymon and War Greymon.
Right
And
now, but eventually you're just running the black red deck that
yes, because
you've lost the choice.
the deck has more synergy with the red and black cards. You get more consistency off of the fact that they are red and black, because like right now, as an example, like I see a lot of lists in Black War Greymon run red memory boost. Well, guess what one of their level 4s is? Black.
Yep, pure black.
So it's like, oh, my red memory boost to search out every other card but that one level 4 is really good, except for that moment where I need that one level 4 that this card doesn't search for. Well, obviously, when they make a red black level 4, hey, now I can take out that black one because I have a red black one that makes my memory boost even better and more consistent. It doesn't necessarily matter the fact that I lose blocker, I gain something else from it, which does then shift how the deck wants to be played and what cards you're incorporating into it.
I just think that there's some creative liberty lost when they are I mean, it is a children's card game, right? It's not Magic. It's not I mean, not that Magic's like made for adults, but
They say 13
it
plus
wasn't
on the
made for
box.
children. It wasn't made for children either. Um and I as someone who enjoys experimentation, enjoys creative processes, and you've brought up examples of how people have found ways to see cards and use cards that aren't necessarily explicitly made for those reasons. And I like when they result in something interesting and fun and not necessarily something that breaks the card game because the designer like I mean MDF was not designed to be used with Susanomon, and the fact that they had to ban it because of that, it wasn't a broken card if you discount Susanomon,
No, I think
but
it's that card's still pretty broken.
well it just restricted the design space of level 7s in general. But
Right.
um I think there is room, and you brought up the BL stars as every they're just kind of chomping at the bit for any random card printed with a 7 cost option, and um how can I use this and is this useful? And even though they're using like a base that's pretty old at this point, as far as just BL Star and the imp mons that recur it, but um, it just it lets me less excited for the new sets because it already takes away one layer of excitement for the new sets when I look at Japan's lists and Black War Greymon's like 40% of the meta, and it's even worse when I look at the deck lists for Black War Greymon. It's like, okay, well, maybe there's at least some choice to be made in which Black War Greymon I Black War Greymon, and they change 2 or 3 cards at most.
I mean, that you look at the evolution of the Black War Greymon in the Japanese meta, and there's actually a lot of variance between
Yeah, but we
each
pick up
set
where
when
they
they get
left
more
off, though.
cards.
All that initial variation has been done for us. You know,
I
it's
mean,
like the
yeah,
first couple generations of an AI.
we could
You just kind of discount that.
yeah, I mean, we could obviously see like what variant based on the sheer number of play has been doing success versus the others, but that doesn't discount that other variants still exist though.
No, it's just like I'm not going to buy somebody's like peanut butter and strawberry and raspberry smoothie because they tried it and they didn't know if it was good or not. I'm just going to try the strawberry banana because I know that's good. They've proven that's good. I'm
I mean,
going to skip that part.
you do generally lose a lot of creative liberty when it comes to deck building and deck design when you are 6 months behind,
Just
and we do have
yeah.
that information to look at, especially when we're talking about competitive, when we're already limiting the card pool already to be as optimal as we could possibly make it with the options available. So those two compounding factors do just, yes, there is a loss in that creativity, but that you still have some creative things that you can do based on what you like, the cards that are given, how much support something has gotten, and like where things are currently developing.
Hmm. Yeah. It's you're right. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. You're right. Is that you still have choices to be made. I just wish there were more. And if
I think you need sets
ban
more like BT9 where it is not necessarily, hey, there is this whole new brand new deck introduced into the set and it's like, no, this set just is updating a lot of older decks. I think you
I
just need
mean,
something more like that.
honestly, like
And I think
um
BT13 does that pretty nicely. I don't know, it's not to the same extent as BT9, but like
yeah.
I'm that's why I'm hyped for BT13.
One of the things that I think is something that I've found that not something I really hope for rather frequently, but something that I'm looking at like which sets was I most excited for and why? And I think BT8 was probably my favorite only because of what BT8 did, and how it introduced 2 colors and how I really liked the idea of 2 color decks and how like they could adopt different ideas of the color identity and that whole design space. But more importantly, I think the small like the undertone there was that we were also in a world where all Japanese data was basically completely unreliable because the decks they had were no longer legal for us to play. So, I mean, if we walk into a BT11, I know we've talked about it before, it's probably just not happening at this point, where they just ban Black War Greymon. Just, pick it up and throw it away. It's gone. It's not the omnipresent, meta present, or omnipresent force that it is. Just or at least bring it down to you don't have to like remove it from existence like they did with like Crosshearts in BT10, but bring it in line, make it so that I'm not just wrong for playing anything else, and then I can at least because once you do that, you also do it for us first, and then I do get some freedom in deck building for a little while where I try and figure out, okay, well, in a world where Black War Greymon isn't the best deck, what is? And really hope it's not Melga again, but maybe it's just Melga again, but that's a different problem. Um, but like maybe BT11, maybe Black War Greymon in a worse capacity is still enough to check Melga to the point where people would actually still stop playing Melga, but also Black War Greymon wouldn't be 60% of the meta. I don't know. Like that's the only time we as North American English players get the opportunity to play a deck that's never been played before is when there's a restriction announcement between the Japanese data and us playing the cards.
I mean, like, we already have a small amount of differences already, just because they get promos that we don't, and well, I can't really say vice versa,
Yeah, but
but
like, is
it's not
anyone
as
really?
impactful.
No one's breaking. I mean, I'm gonna pull up the stupid promo list. I gotta find its name to make the joke. Um, scrolling. Uh, yeah, it's not gonna make or break my Black War Greymon list via my inclusion of Espimon. I don't even know if I would run around Espimon, but I don't like that I don't have the choice. Um, and uh, the point is though is that like nobody's deck is made or broken by Espimon. Sometimes they have made promos in the past that have broken things. Uh, looking at you,
Where
um,
Garurumon?
Kawagamon
Kawagamon. Yeah, that card.
promo literally like makes Grandis a thing. Without Grand Kawagamon, Grandis wouldn't be a thing. Without, um, I mean less so, but back in the day without
No, I
promo
don't think the
Calmon,
yeah.
Pulsemon to an extent with Lord Nightmon, um, Don Demi Devimon with the Don Devi deck. Like, I just think that if they were to make not even like super meta defining announcements, just some sort of changes on the release, it could basically completely rescope my approach to an English meta because I could just look at the Japanese data and not be worried about it, not be upset about it, and just be able to look at it and see, man, this is what they played with. And then knowing in the back of my mind that whatever changes they're going to make to our meta will tweak, maybe not completely, but play with the um, meta that we will eventually have to play in and allow us to be creative in our deck building.
I don't necessarily think it's going to make our deck building any more or less creative. It's just the meta environment as a whole would be restructured based on the tweaks and changes that are made. And like the exclusion of specific promos, like the promos that we have right now, are pretty low impact. Although it does help certain decks depending on what the promo is. Um, but like, I get that you just want more of a Wild West on what to play and how should I be playing it. And um, like, yes, they could try start banning and restricting cards a little bit more proactively, but I think they don't necessarily want to do that. BT10. But um, regardless, I it's not detracting from my overall enjoyment, and I, as somebody who builds literally almost every deck under the sun and struggles building certain decks, especially the more casual ones, just because there is less data to go off of, so I do have to be more creative. And that's just part of the fun that I have as a content creator and a person who is approaching the game is like, can I actually make something powerful and interesting? Is this going to be competitive enough to bring to locals, or is it just like something of a fever dream? You don't know until sometimes you test it and you build it, and sometimes you are just sitting in that waiting room where it's just like, I just need this one piece of support, and then I'm cracked.
Yeah,
Like
and then your Machine Dramon and you get it in BT12 after Nats.
I, I mean,
They could have put that in BT11. I don't
yes,
know
they
why
could
they
have put Chaos Dramon X Antibody in
they should have.
BT11. They and yes, they should have. But that's just them and their set design, and just the fact that we are just behind, and we do have to live with this information network that is already there to basically go off of. But like, there's just a lot of different things that Digimon does as a card game as a whole that's still very appealing to me. And even if they don't do bigger sets, and even if they do wacky and weird stuff and keep adding different product lines and changing product lines, it's still a I still am enjoying the game, and At least they're listening to some of the feedback, because we didn't even hit on the poll that they ran for the changes to Ultimate Cups, which
Mhm.
personally I really hope they don't touch anything outside. Like, I losing competitive integrity for something more wacky and zany is definitely something from a data perspective I don't want to lose. Because I can't, like, oh, here's an Ultimate Cup. I guess we're playing starting with 10 memory. It's like, no, I do not want that. I just want to play Digimon for what Digimon is. And like, that's just set design, block structure, like looking ahead, and the foresight that we don't necessarily have or do have, depending on the scope in which we're referring to. But yeah, I know it's not the perfect world and it's not the perfect game, but I'm still having fun with it at the end of the day.
Mhm. I I still have a generally positive outlook on the game, as much as my words may seem like I don't. Um, I
Just wait
mean,
for BT14.
well, I mean, hopefully, hopefully we're all still here for BT14. Um, the the real thoughts though is that like I wouldn't be this passionate if I didn't care, right? Like how many people have just stopped playing without, making a, Dunzo manifesto about it. Um, and it, it's I just see where it could be, and it frustrates me when it's not where it could be, and just I almost have the opposite perception of what I had last year, looking at like where we were now, just about approaching Nats, looking at 7, 8, 9. Those were the best sets that I was like, man, we haven't even gotten to the good part yet. But looking at 12, you know, reprint pack 13, it's not the same outlook. I'm not gonna lie and say it is, because 11 and 12 seem fine. We'll see how much Blackboard Greymon ruins it and puts a sour taste in my mouth about it, because it's just the Blackboard Greymon show, maybe with a us featuring Beelzemon X antibody, apparently. But um EX4 looks. I mean, the EX sets are always kind of,
Yeah, the EX sets are
hot
usually one
garbage.
one deck is good, and then everything else is mediocre at
It
best.
good for that one micro format exclusively, and then a reprint set, and then
Well,
13, which looks. We have known nothing of 13 really, but um,
13 is going to be the Royal Knight and Saver set, but 14 we know nothing about. We just got the starter decks that are going to supposedly have new mechanics leaked, which is going to be Garurumon and Agumon again. But
mhm.
speculation, be told, we don't know what those new mechanics are. We don't even know what color those decks could be, because for all we know, they could be purple Garurumon, because that hasn't been supported in forever. It's still Garurumon. It's still something new that
Oh
it's
yeah,
trying to do.
I've seen the
And then we
memes
have,
about them milking the dead cow.
yeah, and we also could get more mono yellow Agumon, because we've already had that also. So like, there's still room for them to play around with and experiment.
hmm Um, I just hope that they really like. I mean, we're getting towards the game is becoming older than younger, and I feel like they're getting lazier with, you know, it's a meme and it's not a meme, because, as I imagine, people will give me shit for it. Like, I don't really want the Greymoniest Greymon that can Greymon. I want some, active choices here. Why am I running BT12 Greymon versus BT11 Greymon? Because you told me to? I don't like that. Give me a reason to. Make it so that BT12 Greymon is better against aggro decks, and BT11 Greymon's better against control decks. And okay, well, this okay, this format's a little bit more aggro. I'm gonna, switch my ratios around so I'm more 12 than 11. Like, and this is me, like, completely disregarding what the cards printed actually do, because that's the point of the design space, that
Well, I
they
mean,
could do that.
you do have that option already in Black Fork Greymon. You
For what
have
though?
the black side of things is more defensive and the red side of things is more
But it's not.
offensive.
But it's the
And you
Black War
could
Greymon. It's the Black War Greymon deck.
yeah, but
Like,
depending on what your low end is changes how you play your top end because it's like, okay, maybe I don't need Gaiomon if I'm going more defensive because he's more of an aggressive card. You're only playing him mostly because of the mirror match anyway. So like I don't it there is that flexibility depending on some of the tech choices that you made. I'm just pointing that out there. But
and I
like
think maybe the disagreement between like aggression and like interaction, because like, do I consider War Greymon X to be an aggressive deck? Not really. It's just a single stack blowout deck. That doesn't make it aggressive. That just makes it hit hard when it hits. That's not aggression. That's just damage.
well, yeah, the DPS, like this is where Digimon is more unconventional in terms of like what do we define as mid range, what do we define as control, what do we define as aggro,
Yeah.
and that's like kind of the beauty on what I love about Digimon is like what is that definition? We don't necessarily have the clearest cut. So we're just going to go with what makes more logical sense. So in my perspective, aggression does equates to damage. So having a higher damage output means that you could close games faster, which means that you are inadvertently more aggressive in terms of what you're capable of doing. But regardless, like I'm just hoping we're going to see some Lugamon support and hopefully Lugamon will play nicely with the other true X antibody Digimon and yeah, like that's all I want at the end of the day because ever since the Digi convention, which was borderline almost a complete waste of time, just because there was no announcements from it. The only announcement that mattered was Lugamon is a new Digimon.
Like Lugi.
Well, Looga, Luga, and then Mon. But he is basically to describe him auditorily, he's a dog Digimon. He's a good fluffy wolf boy, and not like actual boy, but like he is an actual wolf. And I love him very much.
Where
So
does he fall on the furry scale?
he's a dog.
Okay.
Like
But
he is a
decidedly more
actual
dog than person?
yeah 100% more dog than person.
Okay, then. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. But I know we went a little extra over. This is to kind of make up for the fact that we weren't there last week. Um, so I hope everyone enjoyed this extra rambling. And with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.
Goodbye.